Hello, friends, and welcome to this podcast. I'm going to talk about music. One album that I see on a lot of these YouTube channels where people talk about records, people talk about their favorite albums, their favorite music, favorite pop stars, favorite rock bands, favorite post rock bands or post punk bands, whatever. One album that turns up a lot, and people talk about it having a lot of meaning for them and being a very powerful album. It's not really a pop album. Usually I kind of lean towards pop, but I really love this album because it is not a pop album. It is not an uplifting, happy album. There's a lot of sort of drama attached to this album in more ways than just the music as well. There's tragedy behind the story of this band and things like that. I want to talk about Joy Division. This is the classic album. You've seen that on a million T-shirts being worn by people who, if you ask them what that is, they play dumb and ask them what it is. They're like, "Oh, I don't know." So it's it's an album though that had a lot of meaning for people around this time who were into kind of melancholy. There's an edge to this album that addresses a lot of the darkness and the depression that some people were feeling as young people growing up in troubling times back in those days. And in being a young person, your emotions are elevated, and your happiness is extreme, and your sadness is extreme. And there were some bands that addressed the happiness and addressed the anger and the aggression, and there's some bands that addressed the love and the overwhelming feeling of love. The type of when you're like a teenager and you just fall in love with everyone and everything and every album, and you just love it, everything. But then there's bands that sort of address the darker side of being a younger person. And Joy Division, Ian Curtis, the singer, had a voice that sounded like a sad person singing. He sounded like a troubled, sort of tormented guy, and he was. Unfortunately, no longer with us, took his own life. That's another aspect of this band that is so sad. And he took his life before a tour. It was like right before they were probably going to kind of break through a bit in with their music. Of course, the other band members went on and formed another band, but Joy Division did some work, did a couple of things, did some things that were very moody and a little bit hard to interpret at first. The music doesn't sound as full and upbeat as a lot of music. It has a kind of a tinny drum sound. The bass playing is kind of in your face, kind of up front. Peter Hook, with his very melodic bass playing kind of up high on the neck. He was playing lead bass. And the guitar playing was almost like a secondary thing that was sort of filling in around the bass playing. And the singing was the focal point because his voice sounded like it was coming through a megaphone or something, or that he was calling you on some kind of a interdimensional telephone, and he was warning you about things and telling you about these terrible things that he was witnessing and whatever. The music is sort of haunting in that way. I mean, read about it. Read about Ian Curtis, poor guy, and the other band that came after Joy Division. But the album cover, I remember being so unique at the time. It doesn't say Joy Division on here really big. It doesn't have pictures of the band. And then on the back, it doesn't have anything either. It doesn't even have song names on the back. It says Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures, the title of the album. And then a straight line, and then the Factory Records release. It doesn't really tell you anything. You sort of already have to know. You have to be a member of Joy Division club back in those days before you knew what you were even buying, and you're like, Joy Division, unknown players. You take out the record where the songs are listed on the record, and it's like, no luck, no songs listed there. So let me flip it over. The songs are probably on the other side. No songs listed there either. So then you take out the inner sleeve. Let's see if we can find a clue here. Yes, on the inner sleeve, there is a clue. Yeah, here we go. No, there's nothing here. It's just a very sort of scary picture of a door, like something from Twin Peaks, like the David Lynch, like that was in Laura Palmer's bedroom, I think. I don't know. So then you flip it over and it's like, okay, here we go. There's some song names. There's some song names and some information. So finding information about the songs on this album was a bit like the band. They were not super obvious about everything. A lot of their designs didn't have the names, didn't have a lot of words on it. It was very ambiguous and kind of confusing in a way. But if you knew, you knew. And if, I remember seeing this album in all my friends' houses around this time. It was always right on the front of their records. You flip through. It's back in those days when you go flip through somebody's record collection to kind of find out if you want to be friends with them or not. And a lot of times you'd see that one on the front. If you knew that one was on the front or somewhere near the front, you'd flip a few back and you'd find like the first 3 Cure albums. Then you'd find some Bauhaus and then maybe some Cramps. And you'd go back a little bit further and find, the records that you expected to see in the sort of melancholy realms of music in those days. I guess what became known as goth. Not sure if Joy Division would be called goth, but I would say that a lot of the vibe of goth kind of is certainly within Joy Division. And there's also the that element of sadness because of the loss of the lead singer. But you can go, you can find more from them if you follow New Order. Go look up New Order, and their albums are great as well. But there's something very dark and haunting about the Joy Division albums. I still play them every so often, and it takes me back. It takes me back in some ways. Fortunately, it doesn't depress me anymore. I just listen to it as far as as a creative endeavor by some people who were really not trying to sound happy or poppy or uplifting or rock and roll. They were doing exactly what they felt inspired to do, and you get the feeling that these were not happy times for these guys, and so it showed in their music. They weren't thrilled about where they lived and the politics that was happening in their country at the time, and things like that. You can hear that in some of the music of those days that was starting to come out. The unhappiness with the way things were, and as people were growing up, and the punk rock ideas of no future and all that. But the anger and aggression part of punk rock had its purpose as far as like that. You go to a punk rock show and people would get in the mosh pit and they push people around. They sort of get their aggressions out, their angsty feelings of unhappiness or the unstable nature of their lives, and that feeling of unease about the future. They would get that aggression out at these punk rock shows. But then there were bands, like Joy Division, where the other sadnesses where they would address those other sadnesses that you would have that were not quite aggression or anger. It was those other emotions that a lot of us, all of us, probably felt in those days. And in that way, I think they were very important to a lot of people. Like, you're not alone. You're not the only one who has a sad voice when, But anyway, that's my impression of Joy Division. That's why I still love them, always love them. And Ian Curtis and what he brought to the world of post-pop or post-punk music, and an expression of very personal feelings that he had. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Thanks for listening. And I will see you again real soon.